Hey, everybody, and welcome to our presentation. We're going to be talking about ransomware and killware, what's coming and how to prepare. Sounds scary? Well, because it is. That's how it goes. That's how cybersecurity is sometimes. Um, my name's Jake Milstein. I work at Critical Insight with Mike Hamilton. We're going to do like real intros here in a second. Before we do, so Critical Insight is a Bremerton, Seattle, Ellensburg, right here in the Pacific Northwest based company that does cyber defense, well, for all of North America. We have security operation centers. We do risk assessments. We do a whole bunch of stuff. But just so you know what we do, the security operations centers watch networks 24/7, help you prepare for an incident, see an incident, and then help you respond if the unfortunate happens. And we're going to talk about here is you can't keep the bad guys out 100%. So, you got to be ready. So we're going to do introductions. We're going to talk about malware. We're going to talk about criminals. Sometimes those criminals are nation states. Sometimes they're activists. And then we're going to talk about solutions. Mike, next slide. So Mike Hamilton, who's going to be doing most of the speaking, is the Critical Insight founder. He's also the former CISO of Seattle. How many cybersecurity companies do you know formed by the CISO of Seattle? Former CISO of Seattle? None, just him. It's pretty cool, right? And I'm Jake Milstein. I'm the event host, which means that you hear from me in the beginning, you hear from me in the end, and you don't hear from me in the middle, unless I want to interrupt Mike, which I
Except for
might do.
the heckling part,
Except
yeah.
for the heckling Mike, that might happen. Sometimes he says things, and I want to heckle him. These things happen. All right, Mike, all yours. Next slide.
All right, let's go. All right, so welcome everyone, and I'd like to talk to you for about 25 minutes, and hopefully this is not going to land where you think it's going to land. We're going to talk about things that we talk about all the time, but I would like to wrapper this around the fact that we're having our behinds handed to us. We are really outmatched. So it's been reported cybercrime costs $6 trillion in 2021. That's the amount of loss. That's direct loss, just theft. That's also all of the long tail for all of these events, all of the brand damage, the regulatory oversight, the fines. That's what it adds up to, 6 trillion. Now, of the part that is actually exfiltrated from the United States, most of this goes to Russia. Russia has few sources of income. They sell natural gas, and that's about it. So Russia's economy, their gross domestic product is $1.4 trillion. Okay. The United States, that's about $21 trillion. So if there's $6 trillion that are leaving the country, and most of that is going to Russia, at least the part that's a direct loss, do you think Vlad really wants to stop this stuff? The answer is no. We are reading about criminals being arrested in Russia, and I think those are just token actions because they don't want this sweet, sweet money to quit coming in. $2 billion a year is lost through business email compromise. This all turns out to make cybercrime the third largest economy in the world. Cybercrime dwarfs the economy of California. And by the way, China owns all of our secrets. Not only do they own all of our secrets, the FBI reports that China attacks the US more than all other countries combined. So, yeah, we're having our behinds handed to us. Now, with the malware that used to be just viruses, it's all evolved, and nation state capabilities are now finding their way into just a commodity malware. So signature based detection, yeah, you know what? Your IDS sensor is almost useless now. 99% of what it says is wrong anyway. Malware repacks itself over and over and over so that those signatures don't work. And that's a good technique for them. Obfuscation and evasion. We're talking about disabling the endpoint security. We're talking about the use of encryption so that command and control communications and exfiltration can't be monitored. These have gotten very effective. Anti-analysis techniques. The malware knows if you're looking at it. So these techniques have improved to the point where the deck is stacked against us here. We're talking about organizations that put way more into development than we do into our preventive controls. Fileless malware, now all over the place. Malware that just executes in memory so that you're not going to find it. You can't get a sample, don't know what happened. Zero malware attacks. Zero malware is just the use of regular tools. Remember, I can package up some exotic exploit and deliver that to you in some way, hope it gets through your systems, hope that your computer is vulnerable to the exploit that I'm trying, or I can get you to give me your password and I'm just walking to your network. Well, a lot of that's going on. And if I just walk into your network, I can start using tools that don't meet the description of malware. That is growing. Use of encryption, I mentioned that, and I'll say, watch for key links of 4096 bits because criminals are paranoid and very few people use key links of that size. So that is a detection technique. And, Linux and malware or Linux and Mac malware, you know, y'all can't be so smug anymore because now you are in the sites. All these things are capabilities that are growing in malware and the malware that is available to just about everyone. Criminals getting a lot better at what they do. Okay. Let's talk about product development. Let's talk about tech support. Let's talk about distribution, quality assurance, customer service. The top earners in the ecosystem of malware and cyber criminality make about $2 million a year. Okay. Now, business email compromise is up. It's an easy way to steal money. Just fool people into taking their money. And right now, there is a campaign going on right now. Executives are being targeted with O365 accounts via a problem with OAuth and some applications that use OAuth. Might want to research that. I actually received a sample of that just the other day from somebody's account that had been compromised. Then they came after me. There's a large push for records to be acquired and then sold for tax fraud right before tax time. Let's remember the state that just had to announce that about 600,000 records meeting the definition of personally identifiable information were just lost in January, on or about January 23rd, 24th. That's the state of Washington. Something like that that happens right around tax time is correlated with the fact that it's tax time and we can expect a lot of tax fraud. There's still a lot of phishing going on. In fact, in our security awareness training, we show a graph that shows the rise in phishing sites and the corresponding drop in sites that push malware on you. Well, that's bouncing back a little bit. Vulnerability exploit is ticking up. And let's remember that the scanning for announced vulnerabilities starts in about 5 minutes now. And the example to use there is when there was a researcher that chained together 3 exploits that were able to take over Microsoft Exchange, on-premise Microsoft Exchange. 5 minutes after that announcement, people were looking for vulnerable Exchange servers. We now have this ecosystem that includes ransomware as a service, initial access brokers, those that just gain persistence in a network and sell it. Okay, you can buy access to Morgan Stanley's network if you want it. Okay, and the big affiliate ecosystem, you don't have to have any skills anymore. All you need to do is contract with the bad guys, pick your target, and start collecting money. Sectors are being targeted for criticality, notably the health sector. Why? They can't stand downtime. Lately, they've been backing off of using ransomware against hospitals because that's now classed as terrorism. So we've seen a corresponding uptick in more records disclosure. Living off the land, using the tools that are there for administrators so that they can't be detected using tools. All that is a new tactic, and it is very prevalent right now. And the amount of automation that is now part of the attack surface that's being hit right now. 86% of attacks against accounts are now driven by bots. 1 in 4 new account registrations is fake. 80% of login attacks are credential stuffing. All these statistics should tell you where all this is going. So the automation that's been implemented is just another thing that we're going to have to deal with. And unfortunately, the scale that it's being used does not bode well for us. And then there's the state actions. Okay. So the criminals and the states are a little hard to deconvolve at this point. So you see the article there. That was when I show articles like this, they come from the daily news blast that we put out every day. Modern warfare is catching companies in its crossfire. We all know about the collateral damage that occurred with the NotPetya attack. Interesting thing that just happened. Merck was able to get their insurance company to cover that, and the insurance company wasn't going to do that because they were calling it an act of war. Well, these kind of court cases coming up should really be a tell here about the kind of thing that may be landing on our doorstep. You will note there is an increasing frequency of the warnings from CISA and the FBI saying, what they said was shields up. You need to worry about this. And those warnings are coming out over and over now. We know that Russia colludes and cooperates with their criminal network. In fact, uh, it's widely reported that they take a little off the top. And, again, these arrests that we've seen are probably more token than anything else and going to be used as a chit in some upcoming negotiations. Um, More attacks from China than all other countries combined. China is interested in espionage and intelligence. And things like the Equifax breach and the Office of Personnel Management breach years ago, none of that information has ever been seen online, and it's widely thought this is all being mined now by China so that they understand who is associated with who reports to who, for the purpose of being able to get to an asset, right? If we want to get to that person, we know this is the chain of people to go through. Disinformation is everywhere, and it's now a tool of war. It's being used against Ukraine right now. In fact, the reporting this morning shows that this is rampant. Here in the United States, I don't know, 30% of us are going to believe whatever is hung in front of us because it confirms our pre existing worldview. That fact is leveraged by countries, and they will hang absolute crap in front of you, and 30% of you are going to believe it. Sophisticated surveillance tools, right? Everybody knows about NSO. There's 3 or 4 companies that do exactly the same as NSO and their Pegasus software, the zero-click malware that'll take over a phone. Countries are buying that stuff. Uh, Cyber war exclusion. Insurance companies are trying to get off the hook here. And again, in that Merck lawsuit, they didn't. Well, what that means is the insurance companies are all going to work right now, buttressing those exclusions so they are unambiguous. Other nations see all of this. Turkey is now getting into the game. In fact, Iran and Turkey are almost at fisticuffs right now, cybering each other. And then finally, was it ransomware or was it killware, right? Or a wiper? There are attacks that are made to look like this is a criminal act, and yet it is not. It is done for the purpose of taking out a network. The best example of that is 35,000 systems. Saudi Aramco all had the life snuffed out of them all at once. That kind of thing may be coming here too. It may be disguised as organized crime. It will not be organized crime. Now, when we are talking about, what are we going to do about this? How are we going to fight back? There are all of these things we do all the time, and the guidance we get is always the same. Here's a little bit of a nuance on that. So, think of both terms in the risk equation. There's the likelihood of a bad thing happening and the impact of that thing happening. And we do everything that we can to buy down the likelihood of a bad event through the application of preventive controls. Once you've exhausted your ability to buy down risk by minimizing that likelihood, then you have to worry about impact. So, impact can be, hey, help desk cleaned up somebody's workstation. It can also be, hey, the FBI called and all of our records are for sale online. Well, if you do good monitoring and you have good response capability, you can make impact number 1 your preferred impact and not worry about impact number 2. Focus on eyes on glass. When malware hits, when something is going on in your network, when somebody's trying to jimmy something out the front door, if you're watching that network, you can see those aberrational events happen. Continue to hunt for threats. look around for stuff that just looks weird. It in a normal network, there's a single DNS server that should be the only one authorized to talk outbound on port 53 UDP. And if you have a whole bunch of assets in your network all talking to their own DNS servers, something's wrong. You can hunt for threats like that really easily. Keep up the threat intel. If you have been targeted, your sector has been targeted. And your sector may be small and medium business, and those are big targets right now. You need to be aware of that. And one way to do that is to pay attention to the CISA and FBI alerts that are coming out, because they're trying to tell us what's going on. There is now a kind of a sea change going on where the federal government is being very forthcoming about what they know, regardless of whether or not it may be disclosing a tactic they use to come by that information. So pay attention to those alerts because they're written for you. Keep up on the indicators. I said signature based stuff is no good anymore. That's not entirely true. Just keep up on your signatures. When somebody uploads something into Virus Total and it's never been seen before, but it's confirmed as malware, all of the AV, all of the endpoint security vendors find out about that. So that's a good thing to do. Just keep up those signatures. They'll keep bringing them to you. Desperate times do call for desperate measures. When I worked for the city of Seattle, we took a lot of measurements and we could prove that 40% of the compromised assets in the network were due to the use of personal email. So if you could disallow the use of personal email and in fact rescind the policy of de minimis use and make 40% of the problem just disappear, why wouldn't you do that? Here's your policy: personal use on a personal device. And yes, mobile data management is now way back in scope. There hasn't been a lot of talk about mobile data management for a long time, since BYOD was the bright new thing everybody had to have. Well, mobiles are in scope here, especially now that a lot of employees are permanently working from remote locations. The dependency on mobile is way up, and the bad guys know that. All right. Now, let's talk about the answers you don't expect. Okay. And I'm going to go back to my original premise here. We're having our butts handed to us. We are starting to see more and more things going on from actors like these. Everybody knows about Anonymous. They've been around for a while. They've done some things that really hit the news. They kind of disappeared for a while. They're coming back. Verkada. Verkada is a organization in Sweden. I'll talk about them in a second, as well as Unicorn Riot. These are really interesting organizations. For the most part, what they do is disclose information that they have stolen or come by in some way. When they do that, a lot of it ends up on a site called Distributed Denial of Secrets. That's where all the stuff is made public. Now we're starting to escalate things, and we just saw an example in Belarus. They're called the Belarusian cyber partisans, just to make clear exactly what they think. And they were real irritated that the train system in Belarus was ferrying Russian soldiers across the country. So they did something about it. And then there's this Ram Ranch resistance. This is fairly new, and they were just involved in the Canadian trucker convoy. So we can call this activism. It's kind of close to monkey wrenching, right? When there were pipelines being built and there was big community and social pushback against things like pipelines, and what they would do is people would chain themselves to equipment so it couldn't move, or they would disable that equipment. That was known as monkey wrenching. A lot of this is at the stage of monkey wrenching right now. It's not going to stay that way. Here's some of the things that have been going on recently. And if you haven't seen these in the news, you might want to subscribe to the News Blast, because I make sure things like this get in there. So the Canadian truckers, everybody was donating to them through this Give, Send, Go site. So the site was compromised. The donator list was stolen and it was leaked. And a lot of people are very embarrassed. And I've read that some businesses have shut down because of the unwanted attention. Um, Verkada in Sweden. hijacked live video from cameras all over the world, made it all public. Again, in the trucker protest, they were using Zello to communicate, just a chat channel, and an activist who said, "This looks easy and I'm bored," decided that what he was going to do was enter the chat, make friends with the people there, have himself designated as an administrator, then start fights among all the truckers, get them to argue, and then lock them all out. So, and this is very recent. This happened last week. I talked about the Belarusian train system going down, and there are other examples that have turned kinetic like this, if I can use kinetic. Um, and then Anonymous was in the middle of this Epic business, and I'm going to talk about Epic for a second. So, Epic is a domain registrar, and it handles the most unpleasant sites there are. I can talk about Stormfront, things like that. Well, Epic was the one that was the domain registrar there. Anonymous decided they were going to take everything away from them, all the login information, everyone's chat, everything everyone had said, including copies of the virtual systems that actually ran Epic. So again, this is starting to get to be more than activism. This is starting to be a little more like fighting back. And so, in our efforts to fight back against criminals who are taking $6 trillion out of the global economy every year, we might want to look at things like this and wonder how this is going to go. So, here is an article from Federal Times. It's an opinion piece. I happen to agree with it. So, this is about demilitarizing civilian cyber defense. If it was known to the world that the shackles that are on the federal government that prevent the federal government from doing a whole lot of things, especially domestically, especially if a U.S. person is involved, if those shackles are removed and that becomes known to the criminal community, they're going to think twice. So, possibly smacking back might be a way to recover our footing in all of this. Because again, we're having our butts handed to us. So this is a very bubbly developing situation. Sides are being picked. And I'm going to leave you with this. A whole lot depends on what the federal government is doing right now. The federal government has gotten into the game, especially around ransomware, saying that if you use ransomware against critical infrastructure, you're not a criminal, you're a terrorist. Well, that's a rhetorical change. And then they brought to bear the Treasury Department and the Office of Foreign Asset Control so that they could stop cryptocurrency payments to certain exchanges that are known to be used for criminality. That's great. The FBI and the Department of Justice are involved, and we are getting access to these criminals. We're getting them out of countries. Don't go on a vacation to a country where we have an extradition treaty because we're going to snatch you. The Department of Defense is involved, and we are melting the infrastructure used by criminals. A whole lot depends on whether or not these efforts are successful in lowering that $6 trillion a year. We don't have enough people to go around. Companies are always getting us to try and buy new things because we think that that's going to, somehow solve this. It's not. So we have to fight back. How we fight back depends on whether or not the federal government is successful here, and the suggestion that we could all get into the fight is starting to show up more and more. So here's what I'm going to leave you with. A lot depends on whether FedGov is successful here.
All right,
Thanks.
Mike. Next slide. So here are some of the things we do. You'll see it on our booth if you want to learn more. Next slide after this, Mike. We do free security awareness training. So email me and I will get you signed up, anyone in your org for that. Mike, next slide. And there's my email address, jake@criticalinsight.com. There you go. Also, by the way, the first 2 people who email and say, yeah, I want to know about training, We can also do a free 60-minute assessment of your security posture. So email me, ask me if you're first. There's the security assessment, jake@criticalinsight.com. We'll see if you get one. But seriously, we appreciate you coming. Thank you, Seattle. Thanks for everyone to come to this. Mike, thank you, and have a good day, everybody.
Bye.